Today we are delving into the world of Warhammer, and to celebrate the upcoming 4th edition of Age of Sigmar, let's create a diorama on top of a base of the one and only Krondys. I mean, it's not the best name for a legendary dragon, but for now we'll go with it. So next I used all 5 years of my gym strength to defeat the mighty foam. With our foam now slapped on top of Krondys' base, I finally remembered to plug in the foam cutter and decided to move my camera away from the thing I was actually filming. As you've seen, weather permitting, I now do all of my foam cutting outside. This is mainly because the fumes it releases are actually pretty harmful. And when I do it inside of a room, it will take a few hours to finally vent. But with this new magic of the great outdoors, I no longer have to worry. So with the base of the diorama now all cut up, it's time to build Krondys. Now this is the biggest model I've ever built, and while it was fun, oh boy, I did not think about how long it would take to clean everything up from the mold lines to the incisions. It was fun nevertheless though. So with the dragon now built, I decided I no longer want this bit of foam on top. So let's pull it off. I now realise a small portion of this video is me grunting while trying to break foam. And actually, I'm okay with that. But anyway, when I was looking at Krondys' base, he is standing on top of some ruins, so I thought about what kind of scenery would it look best in. And in my mind's eye, the aim of the location of this diorama was once a historical landmark that people would travel to and visit this once beautiful ancient artifact, before Krondys decided to look cool standing on top of it. So to fulfill my vision, we're going to make a small ramp leading up on the side of the diorama, so we can have a small walkway with some rock walls. And on the other side of the diorama, I made a small cave, and hot glued some plaster rocks to the side, which to my surprise, they all fitted perfectly. It is so rare that this happens, but when it does, it surely puts a smile on my face. With the rocks now glued down, there was some overhang where the plaster was peeking out, so to fix this, I glued lots of offcuts of foam on top as we prepare for clay time. With a brand new packet of air drying clay at my disposal, it's finally time to smoosh it in everywhere and start creating our lovely ground. And once it was on, I plopped our dragon on top, so I knew we'd hopefully have enough space. And while this diorama dries, let's start the monumental task of painting Krondys, this magic Disney dragon. And to start, I dry brushed all of his wings, scales and armour in white. Now I had a rough idea of what I wanted the colour scheme to be, and like any time I paint, I went in blind. Now for the base coat you won't need an airbrush, but I used it just because it speeds things up a bit. And for the first colour I'm using Khaki by Vallejo, as it will give these wings a really nice dry dusty colour. And this is the most important step for the wings. I mixed Khaki and bone white together and started stippling with a really big dry brush in random places over the wings. This gave a really nice texture under the skin, and it really added to this magic fantastical old dragon. And sometimes when I thought the colour was a bit strong, I blended it into the rest of the skin, making a small, smooth gradient. But with the dragon skin, I wasn't too concerned about being neat and tidy, as I wanted this dragon to look a bit old, tired and battle hardened. So slowly I brightened the paint on each pass, while decreasing the size of the brush, so the texture would be different each time. And each time I had no real idea what I was doing, but that's the fun part. Looking at a photo and thinking, how can I create something like this? Which then led me to using some black enamel washes. Now for this, I purposefully didn't add any varnishes to the model, as I wanted the wash to stay in the model, and in doing so, when I switch to the mineral spirits, I can control where the wash goes and make a nice gradient with my little cotton wool buds. Now, this took a really long time. But I definitely think the effect it has on the model was well worth it. Oh, and maybe a handy bit of advice, if you're using enamels like this for a long time, you should probably wear a mask. I didn't, and I could definitely taste enamels for a little while after. And the main way I did these wings was by putting the black enamel washes in all the edges and slowly filtering it in towards the centre using my cotton wool buds, and I think it gave it this really cool effect. And with the wings out of the way, let's move on to the skin. I quickly painted all of the skin, or rather scales, in light grey, and a final dry brush of white to enhance the contrast. So for the skin and scales, I'm going to be using a type of contrast paint called Black Lotus by Vallejo. And with this, I worked in small areas, making sure that the paint doesn't pool up in one place. I gave all the skin and scales a coat of this, except for the fleshy areas, like his sides, belly, and his face. Now, the hardest part about painting all the scales is because I've done so much work on the wings, when I had to go in between each of their fingers, that might be a hot take, but when you're painting all these weird finger bones on the wings, you have to be super careful not to get any on the khaki beige colour. And of course, for all the metal areas, I used my favourite paint, Black Metal by Scale 75. I painted all as metal silver because I really like the new Stormcast colour scheme, moving away from this bright gold to a dirty silver. Now once the skin colour had dried, it had quite a satin finish, and me, well, being me, I couldn't resist adding another wash of black wash. Adding these enamels can really help mattify some of the paint, and I really like the way it looks. And finally, it's time to add some highlights, so using the same base colours as the wings, I slowly highlighted all of the scales and added some lines in the wings for some more texture. And like any good dragon, I painted his beard brown and gave him a lovely nail paint job. Now that the dragon is painted, let's get back to the diorama. And here's a little secret. This diorama was actually originally going to be set in the desert at this time, but once I'd glued down all of the sand, I realised it's kinda gonna have a lack of contrast in the piece with the dragon. So I switched it up and went with a nice grassy setting. Oh, and painting desert rocks suck. So for the grass, I used foam flocking with some British essence sprinkled on top. To glue everything down, I used a pipette with some isopropyl alcohol and poured it all over the diorama. Then, with some thinned down PVA or white glue, I put this on top and it really soaks in. Now that the diorama is dry, it's time to prime it black. And while it's in its second drying phase, I quickly painted the base of the dragon by painting all of the rocks in a dark grey with a nice dry brush of a light grey on top. This will add some much needed contrast later on when we're airbrushing the diorama. And as we are going to be doing a lot of dry brushing later on, I gave the diorama a quick zenithal highlight and started painting this Stormcast lady. And after painting her dress and armour, I realised I don't think this is going to fit on the diorama, so maybe I'll leave this for another time. And let's make something far more interesting, let's build some fences. As this is an ancient monument that good old Krondys has just stepped on, it would only be right if it was fenced off. So I cut up some balsa sticks and pushed them into the foam, and superglued them all together in alternating rows. I must say, this is actually arguably the funnest part of the diorama process. Honestly, I had such a blast making these little tiny fences. And after snipping off all of the little extra bits of balsa wood on the fences, I started to use my snippers to create little bits of battle damage or I guess wear and tear on all of the fences, and I think this is what really sells these bits of balsa wood as a fence, when you start to chip away and make it look nice and rustic. So after a quick priming, I painted all of them in wildwood contrast paint, which honestly turned out much better than I could have ever imagined. I always find myself not liking most of my projects 90% of the time, and then there's suddenly a switch when you're almost done where it finally clicks in, and I can finally start to see my vision come true. And for the rocks, I gave the wash of Basilicanum Grey everywhere, as it creates such a nice rock colour, and then dipped some Griff Charger Grey for some colour. Now let's glue the dragon on, except I realised he looks much better facing the other way, so let's quickly fill in all the gaps using the same methods as building the diorama. So to brighten everything up, I airbrushed some striping scorpion's green over all of the foliage to make it nice and well green. I then airbrushed some brown to add some more dirt texture, and the fun thing about this diorama is that since it's on its own base, you could technically use this diorama in a Stormcast army, which I may have to do at some point. After that, my biggest diorama is finally done. Now let's have a look. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button, I would appreciate it so much. And maybe a cheeky sub. As always, I've been Reese, and I'll catch you in the next one.